I never imagined my retirement years would involve corporate takeovers or confronting my own son's betrayal. But life has a funny way of giving you exactly what you need, even when it comes disguised as heartbreak. My name is Margaret Wilson, and after 40 years of building a successful career, I found myself being quietly shipped off to a nursing home by my son. The same son who never knew I had secretly purchased the failing company he worked for. This is the story of how I reclaimed not just my dignity, but my power. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special. For you! At 72, I still felt sharp as a tack. My morning routine never changed. Up at 5:30 a.m., coffee on the porch overlooking the Connecticut countryside, and the Wall Street Journal spread before me. Old habits die hard when you've spent 4 decades as a financial advisor. Though I'd been retired for nearly 2 years, I couldn't shake my fascination with markets and investments. My husband Thomas had passed away 5 years earlier after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer. We'd been comfortable, not wealthy, at least that's what everyone thought. Thomas had been the face of our financial planning firm while I worked behind the scenes, analyzing investments and building strategies. It was the 1980s when we started. Clients trusted a man in a suit more than they trusted a woman with the same qualifications. So I played my part, and we built something meaningful together. Our son Bradley had never shown interest in the family business. "Finance is boring, Mom," he'd say, even as a teenager. He'd pursued marketing instead, climbing the ladder at Meridian Technologies, a mid-sized software company in Boston. At 45, he was now their marketing director, successful by most standards, but always stretching beyond his means. The house in Brookline, the summer place in Cape Cod, private schools for his kids. Bradley and his wife Stephanie lived well, but I knew the truth from our occasional family discussions. They were drowning in debt. I lived alone in our colonial house in Woodbridge, about 2 hours from Boston. It was too big for one person, but the memories kept me anchored. Every Sunday, Bradley would call, brief conversations mostly about his children, rarely asking about my life. Sometimes months would pass between visits. Last September, after I recovered from a minor fall in the garden, the calls became more frequent. "Mom, how are you managing in that big house?" Or, "Have you thought about downsizing?" Always delivered with practiced concern. "I'm fine, Bradley," I'd respond. "The stairs keep me active, and Mrs. Parker from next door checks in daily." What Bradley didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Thomas and I had been far more successful than we'd let on. While we lived modestly in Connecticut, our investments had flourished. The financial crisis of 2008 that wiped out so many had actually strengthened our position, as we'd moved to safer harbors before the storm hit. When Thomas died, I inherited a portfolio worth just over $12 million. I never saw a reason to broadcast this information, not even to our son. "Financial privacy is freedom," Thomas always said. I came to understand the wisdom in those words. Noticed the change in Bradley's behavior last Thanksgiving. He arrived with Stephanie and the kids, Emily and Jason, now teenagers themselves. While setting the table, I overheard Bradley in the study, voice hushed but urgent. "The Lakeside Gardens place has an opening next month. Yes, it's perfect timing. Mom's getting older, and after that fall..." I stood frozen, gravy boat in hand. Lakeside Gardens wasn't a retirement community. It was a nursing home. A place for the infirm, the dependent. I felt my chest tighten. That evening, Bradley was unusually attentive, refilling my wine glass, asking about my health, reminiscing about his childhood. I played along, but the conversation I'd overheard burned in my mind. "How's Meridian doing?" I asked casually over pumpkin pie. Bradley's expression clouded momentarily. "Fine, fine. Some restructuring happening, but nothing to worry about." "Restructuring often means trouble," I said, decades of financial instinct kicking in. "Mom, Business has changed since your day, he said dismissively. It's just corporate evolution. Stephanie jumped in, clearly trying to change the subject. Margaret, we saw this lovely community near us in Massachusetts. Beautiful gardens, activities every day. You'd never be lonely. Oh? I raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting I move? We worry about you here alone, Bradley said, his tone practiced. What if you had another fall and couldn't reach the phone? I nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate the concern, but I'm quite content here. After they left, I did something I hadn't done in years. I researched Meridian Technologies, Bradley's employer. What I found confirmed my suspicions. The company was floundering. Their stock had plummeted 60% over the past year. They'd missed earnings expectations for 3 consecutive quarters. Rumors of acquisition or bankruptcy swirled around financial forums. Bradley's job was likely hanging by a thread, and suddenly, his interest in my living situation made perfect sense. He wasn't concerned about my well-being. He was eyeing my house, my assets, a safety net for when his corporate world collapsed. That night, I called my old friend and attorney, Eleanor Reed. Ellie, I need some discreet financial work done, and I need to update my will. 2 weeks later, I received the call I'd been expecting. Bradley, voice tight with forced cheerfulness. Mom, great news. Stephanie and I found a beautiful place for you. It's called Lakeside Gardens. They have an immediate opening and we've put down a deposit. That's very thoughtful, I said, keeping my voice even. When can I see it? Well, that's the thing. The spot won't stay open long. We thought we could help you pack this weekend and you could move in on Monday. It's all arranged. This Monday? That's quite sudden. It's a fantastic opportunity, Mom. These places have waiting lists miles long. We got lucky. I took a deep breath. All right. I suppose I should start sorting through things. Don't worry about that, Bradley said, relief evident in his voice. Stephanie and I will handle it. We can store whatever doesn't fit in your new place. I'm sure he expected resistance, but I had other plans in motion. That's very kind. I'll see you this weekend then. The moment I hung up, I called Eleanor. Again. It's happening faster than we anticipated. Time to accelerate everything. What Bradley didn't know, couldn't have imagined, was that while he was planning my convenient disappearance into a nursing home, I had been quietly negotiating with the board of Meridian Technologies. As a privately held company teetering on bankruptcy, they were desperate for capital injection. Through a series of shell companies Eleanor had established, I had offered to purchase a controlling interest at a price that made the board members weep with relief. The paperwork had been finalized just the day before, for $6.4 million. About half my portfolio, I now owned 51% of Meridian Technologies. My son's employer was now effectively mine. That Friday night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, surrounded by photo albums and memories. I wasn't sorting them for a nursing home. I was deciding what would come with me to Boston, where I'd leased an executive apartment 2 blocks from Meridian's headquarters. The rest would go into storage. I picked up a photo of Bradley's college. Graduation. His proud smile, Thomas's arm around his shoulders, me standing beside them both. We'd given him everything: love, opportunity, education. Where had we gone wrong? When had our son decided we were disposable? The doorbell rang precisely at 9 the next morning. Bradley stood there with Stephanie, both wearing almost identical expressions of forced enthusiasm. Ready for your new adventure, Mom? Bradley asked, kissing my cheek. I smiled back. Oh, I certainly am, dear, though perhaps not the adventure you're planning. He tilted his head, confused, as I invited them in for coffee before we began the task he thought would end with my quiet institutionalization. Little did he know, I had just become his boss. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "This is really just temporary, Mom," Bradley said, packing my medications into a small travel case. "Just until we find something more suitable." I watched him from my armchair as he and Stephanie bustled around my bedroom, selecting clothes they deemed appropriate for nursing home life. Mostly shapeless sweaters and elastic waist pants. Comfortable, practical, and utterly without personality. They'd already set aside my tailored blazers and silk blouses for storage, claiming I wouldn't need them anymore. "What about my jewelry?" I asked, gesturing to the cherrywood box on my dresser. Inside were pieces Thomas had given me over our 40-year marriage, not particularly valuable in monetary terms, but priceless to me. "We'll keep it safe at our house," Stephanie said quickly. "The staff mentioned that valuables sometimes disappear in these facilities." I nodded thoughtfully. "And my files? The cabinet in the study?" Bradley barely looked up from folding a faded cardigan. "Don't worry about paperwork, Mom. I'll handle all that now." I'm sure he would. My financial documents, insurance policies, property deeds, all would be carefully examined once I was safely deposited at Lakeside Gardens. Bradley had already been dropping hints about becoming my power of attorney for convenience's sake. "I've prepared a few things myself," I said, gesturing to 3 modest suitcases by the door. "Essentials I'll need right away." Bradley glanced at them, frowning. "Mom, your room isn't very big. Maybe start with just one?" "I'm sure we'll manage." I smiled. Inside those suitcases weren't clothes or toiletries, but crucial files for my new position as majority shareholder of Meridian Technologies, along with the keys to my Boston apartment. We loaded everything into Bradley's SUV, my 3 suitcases, and the few items they'd selected for my new cozy life. As we pulled away from the house I'd called home for 30 years, I felt a momentary pang of sadness, not for the building itself, but for the relationship with my son that I'd thought we had. "You've been very quiet, Mom," Bradley said, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "Are you okay?" "Just processing," I replied, gazing out the window. "It's a big change." "Change can be good," Stephanie said from the passenger seat, her voice artificially bright. "Lakeside has a wonderful community. You'll make friends in no time." I thought about the community I'd researched thoroughly after overhearing their Thanksgiving conversation. Lakeside Gardens specialized in memory care and assisted living. The average resident was 84 with significant health issues. Activities included bingo and watercolor classes. Monthly fees started at $7,500, not including additional care services. "I'm looking forward to seeing it," I said. The facility itself looked pleasant enough from the outside, a modern 3-story building, with landscaped grounds surrounding a small decorative pond. But the moment we stepped inside, the institutional nature became apparent. The faint smell of antiseptic, the beige walls, the uniformed staff efficiently moving elderly residents in wheelchairs. This was a place for people waiting to die, not for active seniors starting new chapters. Bradley checked me in while Stephanie led me to my apartment, a single room with a bathroom, approximately 400 square feet in total. A hospital-style bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a dresser, and a television mounted on the wall. The one window overlooked the parking lot. "It's compact," I said, setting down my purse. "But so much easier to manage than that big house." Stephanie chirped. "And they clean it for you." A middle-aged woman in blue scrubs appeared at the door. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Nancy, one of your care coordinators. We're so happy to have you join us." She spoke slowly and loudly, as if I were already hard of hearing. "Thank you, Nancy. Please call me Margaret. We're having chicken pot pie for dinner." "Tonight," she continued in the same patronizing tone. "And afterward, there's music in the common room. Mr. Peterson plays the piano every Sunday evening." Bradley began unloading the few clothes they'd brought, arranging them in the dresser. "This place has excellent reviews, Mom, and it's only 30 minutes from our house. We can visit every weekend." I doubted that very much. Your father and I made delicious chicken pot pie, I remarked. We used fresh thyme from our garden and a splash of sherry in the sauce. Well, our kitchen makes 100 meals at a time, so it's more about nutrition than gourmet cooking, Nancy said with a laugh. But it's tasty enough. I sat on the edge of the bed, firm, covered in a floral bedspread that had seen better days. For this, Bradley was paying $7,500 a month. Or rather, he thought my estate would be paying it, now that I was safely out of the way. When is orientation? I asked. I assume there's some process for new residents. We have welcome sessions. On Mondays, Nancy replied. You'll learn all about our schedules and rules then. Rules. At 72, I was back to having rules imposed on me like a child. Bradley checked his watch. We should probably get going. Let you settle in. That was fast. Not even a meal together on my first day. I'd expected at least a perfunctory dinner in the dining hall before they made their escape. Of course, I said. You must have plans. Emily has a soccer tournament, Stephanie explained, not meeting my eyes. And it's all the way in Framingham. Give her my love, I said. And Jason, too. An awkward silence fell. They hadn't brought my grandchildren to say goodbye, hadn't even suggested it. Bradley cleared his throat. So we'll check in tomorrow by phone and maybe visit next weekend? That sounds lovely, I said, rising to hug them both. Stephanie's embrace was quick, perfunctory. Bradley held on a moment longer. This is for the best, Mom, he whispered. You'll see. As they turned to leave, I called out, Oh, Bradley, I left some papers in my top suitcase. Estate planning things Eleanor helped me with. Would you mind bringing them back when you visit? I'd like to review them with you. His eyes lit up. No. Problem. Anything specific I should look for? A blue folder marked Wilson Estate. Eleanor thought you should be brought up to speed on everything. Sure, I can do that. He couldn't hide the eager edge in his voice. After they left, Nancy hovered in the doorway. Dinner's at 5:30. Would you like me to come back and show you to the dining room? That won't be necessary, I replied, moving to unpack my suitcases. I think I'll rest a bit first. Once alone, I waited precisely 15 minutes before pulling out my cell phone, not the old flip phone Bradley knew about, but a new smartphone Eleanor had helped me set up. I texted a prearranged message to my driver, Richard, a retired police officer Eleanor had recommended. Ready for pickup. Eastern entrance. Next, I changed from the comfortable travel clothes I'd worn into one of the business suits I'd hidden in my luggage. I touched up my makeup, secured my pearl earrings, and slipped on low heels. If anyone from Lakeside saw me now, they'd never connect this woman with the docile new resident in sensible shoes. I left most of the clothes Bradley and Stephanie had packed. Where I was going, I wouldn't need them. I took only what mattered, my jewelry box, my real financial documents, and a single framed photo of Thomas. The hallway was quiet as I made my way toward the east wing, following the exit signs. Most residents were already in the dining hall for the early dinner service. At the corner, I nearly collided with Nancy. Mrs. Wilson, you're dressed up. Her eyes widened, taking in my transformation. Yes, I smiled. I have a dinner appointment. But residents need to sign out, and evening passes require 24-hour notice. Her voice held confusion rather than authority. I reached into my purse and handed her an envelope. Inside, you'll find a formal letter terminating my residency, effective immediately. The second month's fee has already been paid as per the contract, so you'll be compensated for the inconvenience. I don't understand, she stammered. You just arrived, and now I'm departing. My son misunderstood my needs. I stepped around her, continuing toward the exit. Please tell Bradley he can find me at Meridian Technologies tomorrow, should he wish to speak with me. Richard was waiting outside in a black Lincoln, just as arranged. He took my luggage and held the door. To the Harborview Apartments, please. I instructed as I settled into the back seat. As we pulled away from Lakeside Gardens, I didn't look back. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed the presentation Eleanor had prepared for tomorrow's board meeting, my first official appearance as Meridian's majority shareholder. My life at Lakeside had lasted exactly 4 hours. My new life, the one Bradley never saw coming, was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with a crystalline brightness that matched my mood. My new apartment at Harborview offered panoramic views of Boston Harbor, a stark contrast to the parking lot vista at Lakeside Gardens. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, sipping my coffee and watching the ferries cross the water, mentally preparing for the day ahead. The doorbell rang precisely at 7:45 a.m. Eleanor, punctual as always, stood there in a charcoal pantsuit, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. "Ready to make history?" she asked, embracing me briefly. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, gathering my leather portfolio. "Any last-minute developments?" Eleanor scrolled through her tablet as we rode the elevator down. "The board members have all confirmed attendance. CEO Howard Mills is bringing his executive team, including your son. None of them know who the new majority shareholder is, just that there's an announcement scheduled. And legally, we're bulletproof?" "Absolutely. The purchase was completely above board, conducted through legitimate investment vehicles. They might not like it, but they can't challenge it." Richard was waiting with the car. During the short drive to Meridian's headquarters, I found myself thinking about Thomas. He would have appreciated the elegance of this plan, not just the business strategy, but the poetic justice. He'd always taught me that in finance and in life, patience was the ultimate advantage. "People show you who they are if you wait long enough," he used to say. Meridian Technologies occupied the top 4 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. The lobby featured the obligatory tech company trappings, abstract art, minimalist furniture, and a reception desk that looked like it had been carved from a single slab of marble. "Good morning," I said to the young receptionist. "Margaret Wilson and Eleanor Reed for the board meeting." Her fingers flew across her keyboard. "I don't see a Margaret Wilson on the calendar." Eleanor stepped forward. "She'll be listed as MT, Holdings Representative. It's a closed session with the board." Recognition flickered across the receptionist's face. MT Holdings, the shell company we'd created for the purchase. "Of course. 14th floor, boardroom A. They're expecting you." As we rode up, Eleanor gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Remember, no matter what happens in there, you hold the cards." The boardroom was impressive, all dark wood and leather, with windows showcasing the Boston skyline. 8 people sat around the massive table, with Howard Mills at the head. Men in expensive suits with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. No sign of Bradley yet. "Ah, Ms. Reed." Howard rose to greet Eleanor, whom he knew from the acquisition negotiations. "And this must be Margaret Wilson, CEO of MT Holdings," Eleanor introduced me. "Your new majority shareholder." A moment of silence, then a low murmur as the board members exchanged glances. "Ms. Wilson," Howard recovered quickly, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please, join us. We were just reviewing first quarter projections." I took my seat and opened my portfolio. "Before we continue, I'd like a complete picture of Meridian's current situation. The acquisition paperwork glossed over some concerning trends." One of the board members, James Harrington, according to his nameplate, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Ms. Wilson, we've prepared a comprehensive orientation package for MT Holdings, but today's meeting was scheduled to discuss immediate operational decisions." "Indeed," I nodded. "And as majority shareholder, I need to understand those operations fully before any decisions are made." The door opened, and a handful of executives filed in. Bradley was among them, head bent over his phone, not yet noticing me. He took a seat near the far end of the table, still distracted. Howard cleared his throat. "For those just joining, we have representatives from MT Holdings with us today. Margaret Wilson, who apparently is the principal of the firm, and Eleanor Reed, whom most of you know handled the acquisition. Bradley's head snapped up at the mention of my name. Our eyes met across the table. The color drained from his face so rapidly I momentarily worried he might faint. "Mom?" His voice cracked, drawing confused looks from his colleagues. "Hello, Bradley," I said calmly. "I believe we have some business to discuss." A weighted silence fell over the room. Howard looked between us, comprehension slowly dawning. "You two know each other?" "Margaret is my mother," Bradley said stiffly. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at Lakeside." "Change of plans," I replied evenly. "I found a more productive use of my time." Howard's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, but what exactly is happening here?" Eleanor stepped in smoothly. "Mrs. Wilson is the sole principal of MT Holdings, which now owns 51% of Meridian Technologies. She's here to take an active role in company oversight, as is her right as majority shareholder." The executives exchanged alarmed glances. Bradley's face had shifted from shock to something darker: anger, betrayal, confusion. "This is ridiculous," he finally sputtered. "My mother knows nothing about technology or corporate management. She's a retired bookkeeper." I arched an eyebrow. "Financial advisor, actually. Partner in Wilson Financial Strategies for 40 years. But your father was always the face of the company. Clients trusted men in suits in those days. I managed our investment portfolio. Quite successfully, as it turns out." Howard was recovering his professional demeanor. "Mrs. Wilson, while this is unexpected, perhaps we should continue this discussion privately before proceeding with company business." "That won't be necessary," I replied, opening my laptop. "I've reviewed Meridian's financial position extensively. You've had 7 consecutive quarters of declining revenue. Your flagship product is losing market share to competitors with more innovative features. Your burn rate is unsustainable, and you've been unable to secure additional venture funding." The room went silent again. I continued. "However, I also see tremendous unrealized potential. Your engineering team is excellent. Your underlying technology is sound. What's lacking is proper direction and financial discipline." Bradley had regained some of his composure. "Mom, you can't seriously think you can run a tech company. Yesterday you couldn't even set up your DVR without help." A few nervous chuckles around the table. "I don't intend to run daily operations," I said coolly. "That's what qualified executives are for. But I will ensure this company stops hemorrhaging money on ineffective marketing campaigns that produce no measurable results." Bradley flinched. Marketing was his department. "Mrs. Wilson," Howard interjected, "while we appreciate your candor, Meridian is a complex organization with established leadership protocols. Major changes require careful consideration." "I agree completely," I nodded. "Which is why I've spent the past 3 months studying your company, your market position, and your competitive landscape. I've also secured the services of Nathan Chambers as a technical advisor." Several board members straightened at the name. Nathan Chambers was a respected industry veteran who had led 2 successful tech companies to IPO. "Nathan starts next week," I continued. "He'll help evaluate the current executive team and make recommendations for any necessary restructuring." Bradley's face had turned from pale to flushed. "This is insane. Howard, she can't just walk in here and take over." Howard gave him a sympathetic but resigned look. "Actually, as majority shareholder, she can." I addressed the room at large. "I know this comes as a shock. Change always does. But I'm not here to dismantle Meridian. I'm here to save it. The quarterly reports don't lie. Without intervention, this company has approximately 16 months before insolvency." James Harrington spoke up. "Mrs. Wilson, while I don't dispute your assessment of our financial position, what makes you qualified to determine the right path forward?" A fair question. I turned to face him directly. "Mr. Harrington, I built a financial advisory firm from nothing into a company managing over $300 million in assets. I've weathered 5 major market downturns without losing a single client. I understand both balance sheets and human psychology, what makes businesses fail and what makes them thrive. I gestured to the spreadsheets displayed on the screen at the end of the table. Your marketing budget has increased 40% year over year, while sales have declined 23%. Your executive compensation has risen while shareholder value has plummeted. These aren't technology problems, they're business fundamentals. Bradley stood abruptly. May I speak with you privately, Mother? We're in the middle of a meeting, I replied. Now, please. His voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. I nodded to Eleanor, who squeezed my arm supportively as I rose. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes, I told the board. Bradley led me to a small conference room down the hall, closing the door with more force than necessary. What the hell are you doing? He demanded, pacing the room like a caged animal. Is this some kind of revenge because I suggested assisted living? Suggested? I echoed. You dropped me at a nursing home without notice and drove away. You didn't even bring my grandchildren to say goodbye. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. It was for your own good. You're getting older, and after that fall, the fall that required 2 bandages and was completely forgotten within a week, I interrupted. Bradley, let's be honest with each other for once. This wasn't about my welfare. It was about my house, my savings, and what you stood to gain once I was safely tucked away. He had the decency to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. That's not fair. We were worried about you. And yes, maybe I thought it would be more practical for you to downsize, but practical for whom? I asked quietly. I heard you on Thanksgiving, Bradley. Then I heard you outside on the phone the day you took me to Lakeside. You didn't think I was capable of managing my own affairs anymore. You wanted control of my assets. He fell silent, unable to deny it. What you didn't know, I continued, was exactly what those assets entailed, or that I was perfectly capable of managing them myself. Bradley sank into a chair, the fight suddenly gone from him. So this is punishment. You bought my company to humiliate me. No, I said, taking the seat across from him. I bought a promising but mismanaged company as an investment. The fact that you work here is incidental, though it does create an interesting opportunity for both of us. An opportunity? Bradley's voice was hollow. You've just publicly humiliated me in front of the entire executive team. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. Humiliation wasn't my intention, but perhaps now you understand how I felt. Being deposited at Lakeside Gardens like an unwanted package. He flinched but quickly recovered. That's different. We were trying to help you. Were you? I asked quietly. Tell me honestly, Bradley, how often were you planning to visit me there? His eyes darted away. Weekends, like I said, when we could. The way you visited me at home? Once every few months, if I was lucky? A muscle twitched in his jaw. We're busy. The kids have activities. Stephanie works part-time, and I have a demanding career. Yes, I know. I gestured around us at the sleek conference room, a career that's been in jeopardy for some time now, from what I understand. Bradley's posture stiffened. So that's what this is about. You found out Meridian was struggling, and instead of offering to help your son, you decided to swoop in and take control. I offered help many times over the years, I reminded him. College tuition, the down payment on your first house, the loan for your Brookline renovation, the check I wrote when Jason needed braces. That's different, he muttered. That was family helping family. And when exactly was it my turn to receive help? I asked, my voice still level. When I fell in the garden, you didn't offer to come stay with me during recovery. You didn't suggest hiring someone to help around the house. Your first and only solution was to put me in a facility where I'd be out of sight and out of mind. He had no answer for that. I continued. The irony is, I was already planning to move to Boston. Not to a nursing home, but to a place of my choosing. I wanted to be closer to you and the grandchildren. Surprise registered on his face. You never mentioned that. You never asked about my plans, Bradley. You assumed I had none beyond sitting in that house waiting for your occasional call. A knock at the door interrupted us. Eleanor poked her head in. The board is reconvening in 5 minutes. I nodded my thanks and she withdrew. Bradley ran a hand through his hair, visibly agitated. What happens now? Are you firing me? That depends on you, I replied evenly. Meridian's marketing strategy needs complete overhaul. The data makes that clear. If you're willing to adapt and implement the changes Nathan recommends, there could still be a place for you here. His face darkened. So I'd report to your hired gun? Mom, I've been in marketing for 20 years. I built this department. And yet Meridian's market share has declined steadily for the past 7 quarters under your leadership, I pointed out. Sometimes we need fresh perspectives, especially when what we've been doing isn't working. Bradley stood abruptly, pacing the small room again. This is surreal. Yesterday, you were this sweet, slightly forgetful retiree we were helping transition to assisted living. Today, you're talking about market share and executive restructuring like some corporate raider. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, disbelieving sound. That sweet, slightly forgetful retiree was a fiction you created because it was convenient for you. You never bothered to know the real me, what I did all those years at the firm, what I was capable of. Dad never mentioned you were some business genius, he shot back. Your father and I had clearly defined roles. He was the public face. I was the strategic mind. It worked for us. I gathered my portfolio, preparing to return to the boardroom. You have a choice to make, Bradley. You can fight this change and eventually lose, or you can adapt and potentially thrive. He stared at me like I was a stranger. In many ways, I suppose I was. We should rejoin the meeting, I said, moving toward the door. Wait. His voice had lost its edge. The house. What happens to it now? Of course. Even in this moment of professional crisis, his thoughts went immediately to what he stood to lose materially. I've listed it with a realtor, I answered. The proceeds will fund my retirement and some charitable interests. Charitable interests, he repeated flatly. But not your family? Not your grandchildren's college funds? I turned back to face him. Emily and Jason already have college funds. I established them at birth. You never asked about that either. The look of surprise on his face would have been comical under different circumstances. As for additional support, I continued, that depends on how we move forward from here. Family relationships should be built on mutual respect and care, not just financial transactions. When we returned to the boardroom, the atmosphere had shifted. The executives were huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed tones that abruptly ceased as we entered. Howard Mills approached us immediately. Mrs. Wilson, perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. Given the personal connections involved, it might be best to take some time to— That won't be necessary, I interrupted smoothly. Bradley and I have had our discussion. We're prepared to proceed professionally. I took my seat at the table and opened my laptop again. Now, as I was saying before, Meridian has both significant challenges and untapped potential. Let's discuss my proposed path forward. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for Meridian's restructuring, where costs could be cut, which product lines deserved additional investment, and how the company's intellectual property could be better leveraged. Eleanor occasionally added legal context, but mostly I commanded the room. Bradley remained silent throughout, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Somewhere between shock, resentment, and perhaps a reluctant glimmer of respect. When the meeting finally adjourned, Howard asked me to stay behind. Mrs. Wilson, I must say, your knowledge of our business is impressive, he said once we were alone. But I have to ask, what's your actual endgame here? Is this about your son, or do you genuinely see value in Meridian? Both, I answered honestly. I wouldn't have invested if I didn't believe the company could be turned around. But yes, the connection to Bradley added personal motivation. Howard nodded thoughtfully. Family business can be complicated. Indeed. Speaking of which, I'd like to see an organizational chart and performance reviews for all senior leadership, especially the marketing department. Of course. He hesitated. About Bradley. He's well liked here. Not always the most innovative, but dedicated. I appreciated his loyalty, even if it was professionally motivated. I'm not here to destroy my son's career, Mr. Mills, but Meridian needs substantial changes to survive, and everyone, including Bradley, will need to adapt. And if he can't? Howard asked carefully. Then he'll need to find opportunities elsewhere. I replied, I won't let personal feelings interfere with business decisions, in either direction. After the meeting, I asked Richard to drive me to Bradley's house in Brookline. I hadn't been invited, but this conversation couldn't wait. The sprawling colonial with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage always struck me as excessive for a family of 4, especially given their financial situation. Today, it looked particularly ostentatious, a physical manifestation of living beyond one's means. Stephanie answered the door, her expression morphing from surprise to alarm when she saw me. Margaret, we weren't expecting you. Her eyes darted. Past me, perhaps looking for signs of a nursing home escort. How did you get here? I drove her, Richard said from behind me. I'll wait in the car, Mrs. Wilson. Stephanie reluctantly stepped aside to let me enter. The house was immaculate as always. Her design career showed in the perfectly coordinated furnishings and artwork. None of it looked lived in or loved. Is Bradley home? I asked, though I knew he wasn't. He'd remained at the office, presumably, to damage control with his team. No, he called to say he'd be late. Stephanie led me to the kitchen, her movements stiff. Would you like some tea? We weren't sure when you'd be contacting us after Lakeside called to say you'd left. Tea would be lovely, I replied, taking a seat at their massive marble island. And yes, I imagine that call was quite surprising. She busied herself with the kettle, back turned to me. Bradley was worried. We both were. You can't just leave a facility like that without proper discharge. I was there for 4 hours, Stephanie. Hardly enough time to become institutionalized. She turned, her carefully maintained composure slipping. Look, I don't know what Bradley told you, but Lakeside was my idea. I researched dozens of places. It has the best ratings in New England. I'm sure it does, I acknowledged. For people who actually need that level of care. The kettle whistled, giving her a moment to collect herself. As she poured the water into a teapot, her hands trembled slightly. We thought it was the right decision, she insisted, placing the tea service between us. That house is too big, too isolated. What if something happened to you there? Something did happen, I replied calmly. I realized my son and his wife were more interested in my assets than my well-being. Stephanie's face flushed. That's unfair. We care about you. Care looks different, I said, accepting the cup she offered. Care asks what I want. Care includes me in decisions about my own life. She dropped her gaze to her own untouched tea. It was complicated. Bradley thought you might resist the idea if we presented it directly. So you decided deception was the better approach? She had no answer for that. The front door opened, and we heard Bradley's voice. Steph? Whose car is that in the driveway? He appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later, stopping short when he saw me. He'd loosened his tie and looked exhausted, the events of the day etched across his face. Mom, he said flatly. I should have known you'd come here next. Hello, Bradley, I replied. Stephanie and I were just discussing Lakeside Gardens. His eyes darted between us, trying to gauge what had been said. I assume you've told her about your corporate takeover? Stephanie's teacup clattered against its saucer. What takeover? I met my son's gaze steadily. I thought you might want to explain the situation yourself. Bradley stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and finally settling on something resembling resignation. Stephanie looked between us, confusion evident on her face. "What takeover?" she repeated. "Bradley, what is she talking about?" He moved to the refrigerator, pulling out a beer with deliberate slowness. "Mom has apparently been leading a double life," he said, popping the cap. "All this time we thought she was a retired bookkeeper with modest savings. She's been some financial mastermind sitting on millions." Stephanie's eyes widened. Millions. "And the best part," Bradley continued, his voice laced with bitterness, "is that she used that money to buy a controlling stake in Meridian. My company? She's now essentially my boss." The color drained from Stephanie's face. "Is this true, Margaret?" I sipped my tea before answering. "I purchased 51% of Meridian Technologies 3 days ago, yes. The company was dangerously close to insolvency, despite what Bradley may have told you about its financial health." "This is insane," Stephanie whispered. She turned to Bradley. "Did you know about this? About her money?" He barked out a humorless laugh. "Of course not. If I'd known my mother was secretly wealthy, do you think I'd have been killing myself trying to make mortgage payments on this place?" I set down my cup, the delicate sound of china against china somehow cutting through the tension. "Let's be clear about something. I wasn't secretly wealthy all these years. Your father and I lived comfortably but modestly. We saved, we invested wisely, and yes, we were more successful than we let on. But the substantial growth in my portfolio happened after Thomas died." "What do you mean?" Bradley asked, his hostility momentarily displaced by curiosity. "When your father passed, I received his life insurance and our retirement accounts. Instead of simply living off that money, I continued managing it actively. The market has been remarkably favorable these past 5 years. I gestured around their expensive kitchen. "Not that I spent it on marble countertops and Viking appliances." Stephanie flinched at the implied criticism. "We thought this house was a good investment. At twice what you could reasonably afford on your combined incomes?" I shook my head. "That's not an investment, Stephanie. It's a liability." "So now you're our financial advisor too?" Bradley snapped. "Swooping in to lecture us about our life choices after hiding your own financial situation for years?" "I never hid anything," I corrected. "You never asked. There's a difference." The truth of this statement hung in the air between us. When had my son last inquired about my life, my interests, my plans? When had he shown genuine curiosity about anything beyond how I might be useful to him? "This isn't about your personal finances anyway," I continued. "This is about the fact that you decided I was incapable of managing my own life and took steps to sideline me without my consent." Bradley's defense crumbled slightly. "We genuinely thought Lakeside was a good option for you." "Really?" I leaned forward. "Then why the rush? Why not take me to tour the facility first? Why not discuss the decision with me like I'm an adult capable of participation in my own life choices?" Stephanie stood abruptly, moving to the sink with her back to us. "We should have handled it differently. I see that now." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "Just as you should have been honest about your financial situation instead of living beyond your means all these years." Bradley slammed his beer bottle on the counter. "You want to talk about honesty? Fine. Yes, we've been struggling, financially. Yes, I've been worried about my position at Meridian. But every time I tried to discuss downsizing or making changes, Stephanie, don't you dare blame this on me." Stephanie whirled around, eyes flashing. "You're the one who insisted we needed the third car, the country club membership, the vacation, home we use twice a year. You're the one who keeps telling everyone how successful you are, how your department is thriving, when you've been terrified of getting fired for months." I watched their argument unfold, seeing years of financial strain, and mutual resentment bubbled to the surface. They'd been living a lie, to their friends, to their children, to each other. And somehow, I had become both a potential solution to their problems and a convenient scapegoat. "Stop," I said quietly. When they continued, I raised my voice slightly. I said, "Stop. This isn't helping anyone." They fell silent, both breathing heavily. "Bradley, when did you first learn that Meridian was in serious financial trouble?" I asked. He hesitated. "About 8 months ago. Howard called in the department heads. The company had missed projections for the third straight quarter. There was talk of layoffs, restructuring. And that's when you started looking into my finances more closely," I surmised. "Asking about my will, suggesting I needed help managing my accounts." He didn't deny it. "I was worried about my family's future. Is that so terrible?" "No," I acknowledged. "What's terrible is that you didn't come to me honestly. You didn't say, 'Mom, I'm in trouble, I need help.' Instead, you manufactured a scenario where I was the incompetent one who needed saving, when really you were trying to save yourself." "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "It was exactly like that," Stephanie interjected, surprising us both. "Let's not pretend anymore, Bradley. We've been drowning for years. The credit card debt, the second mortgage. When you realized your mother might have assets that could help us, you became obsessed with getting access to them." Bradley stared at his wife, betrayal written across his features. "Whose side are you on?" "There aren't sides here," I said. "Just truth and consequences." The doorbell rang, interrupting our standoff. Stephanie moved to answer it, returning moments later with Emily and Jason in tow. My grandchildren stopped short when they saw me, identical expressions of confusion on their teenage faces. "Grandma?" Emily approached cautiously. "I thought weren't you supposed to be at Lakeside Gardens?" I finished for her, rising to embrace them both. There was a change of plans. Jason, always the more sensitive of the two, studied my face. "Are you okay? Dad said you needed extra care now." "I'm perfectly fine," I assured him. "Better than ever, actually." Bradley cleared his throat. "Kids, go upstairs and start your homework. Grandma and I are having an important discussion." "Actually," I countered, "I'd like them to stay. They deserve to understand what's happening." "In their family?" Bradley and Stephanie exchanged alarmed glances. "That's not appropriate," Stephanie began. "What's not appropriate is lying to your children about their grandmother's health and capabilities," I replied firmly. "Or raising them to believe that shipping elderly relatives off to facilities is the natural order of things." Emily looked between us, her teenage intuition sensing the tension. "What's going on? Why is everyone acting weird?" I gestured for them to sit. "Your father and I have different perspectives on what my retirement should look like. He thought I should move to an assisted living facility. I had other plans." "Like what?" Jason asked. "Like continuing to live independently. Like staying active in the business world. Like being closer to you two without being a burden." Bradley made one last attempt to control the narrative. "Mom, the kids don't need to be involved in this. It's complicated adult business." "On the contrary," I replied. "Emily and Jason are old enough to understand family dynamics and ethical decision-making. They should know that aging doesn't mean losing your voice or your rights." I turned to my grandchildren. "What would you think if I moved to Boston? Not to a nursing home, but to my own apartment downtown?" Emily's face lit up. "For real? That would be awesome. We could see you way more often." "We could take the T to visit you," Jason added, his initial concern transforming into excitement. "That's my plan," I confirmed. "I've already leased an apartment at Harborview." "Harborview?" Stephanie couldn't hide her surprise. "Those are luxury condos." "Yes, they are," I agreed. "With excellent security, a gym, and a view that makes every morning a pleasure." Emily turned to her parents. "Wait, if Grandma can live on her own, Why did you say she needed to be in a care home? The directness of teenage questioning, so refreshing in its lack of pretense. Bradley fumbled for an answer. It's complicated, Em. Grandma had a fall recently, and we were concerned about her safety. A minor garden accident that required 2 Band-Aids, I clarified. Hardly a reason to lose my independence. Jason, always perceptive, was putting pieces together. Dad, did you actually want Grandma's house? Is that why you wanted her to move? The silence that followed was damning. Bradley's expression shifted, from defensive to defeated. It wasn't just the house, he finally admitted, voice low. It was everything. The house, her savings, the security of knowing there was a safety net if things went wrong at work. And things were going very wrong at work, I added gently. Weren't they? Bradley nodded, unable to meet his children's eyes. Meridian has been struggling. My position wasn't secure. We're overextended financially, and I panicked. So you tried to take control of Grandma's money instead of fixing your own problems? Emily's question cut straight to the heart of the matter. Emily, Stephanie admonished, this isn't so simple. Actually, it is, I said. Your father made choices based on fear rather than honesty. We all do that sometimes. The question is, what happens next? The weight of truth hung in the kitchen. Bradley looked utterly defeated. Stephanie seemed torn between defending her husband and acknowledging their mistakes, and my grandchildren watched it all with the unfiltered clarity of youth. What does happen next? Jason finally asked. That was the question, wasn't it? I hadn't come here merely to expose Bradley's deception or embarrass them in front of their children. There needed to be a path forward, one that preserved dignity while ensuring accountability. That, I said carefully, depends on what your father decides to do now that everything is in the open. The silence in the kitchen stretched uncomfortably, as Bradley stood with his head bowed, his children watching him with expectant eyes. This was his moment of reckoning, a crossroads where his response would define not just our relationship moving forward, but also the lesson his children would learn about integrity, accountability, and redemption. I don't know what to say, he finally murmured. I've made a complete mess of everything. Admitting that is a start, I said quietly. He raised his eyes to meet mine. What do you want from me, Mom? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have tried to force you into Lakeside, but you've humiliated me professionally, exposed our financial problems to the kids, and turned my wife against me. Isn't that enough punishment? Stephanie flinched. I'm not against you, Bradley. I'm just tired of pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Emily, ever the outspoken one, crossed her arms. Dad, you tried to put Grandma in a nursing home when she didn't need one. That's seriously messed up. We thought it was the right decision at the time, he insisted. For who? Jason asked quietly. For Grandma or for you? The question hung in the air, its simple clarity devastating. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Bradley sank heavily onto a kitchen stool. I don't know anymore. Everything's gotten so tangled. Our finances, my job, what's best for everyone? Then let's untangle it, I suggested. One issue at a time. I turned to my grandchildren. Emily, Jason, would you give us adults a few minutes? This isn't because you don't deserve to be part of the conversation, but because your father needs space to be completely honest without worrying about how you'll see him. They seemed reluctant, but nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. We'll be upstairs, Emily said, tugging her brother's sleeve. But we expect the full story later. Once they were gone, I addressed Bradley and Stephanie directly. Let's start with the practical matters. How bad is your financial situation? They exchanged glances. Stephanie spoke first. We're about $420,000 in debt, not including the mortgage, credit cards, personal loans, The equity line on this house. The summer place in Cape Cod is underwater, worth less than we owe. I nodded, absorbing this. And your monthly expenses? About $15,000, Bradley admitted. The mortgage is $6,200. Private school tuition for both kids is another $4,000. Then the car payments, country club dues, credit card minimums. On a combined income of? My salary at Meridian is $180,000. Stephanie's design work brings in another $50,000 or so. But after taxes, retirement contributions, health insurance, we're bringing home around $12,000 a month. Simple math told the story. They were spending more than they earned every single month, digging themselves deeper into a hole with no way out. So you're short about $3,000 every month, I calculated. And that doesn't account for emergencies or unexpected expenses. Bradley nodded miserably. We've been using credit cards to bridge the gap, convincing ourselves it was temporary. That, a promotion or bonus would eventually fix things. And when that didn't materialize, you looked to me as the solution, I said. It wasn't a question. I knew the house was paid off, he admitted. I figured it was worth at least $1 million in today's market. If you moved to Lakeside, we could sell it, set aside enough to cover your care for years, and use the rest to get ourselves back on solid ground. The cold calculation in his plan struck me anew. And you never considered simply asking me for help? His face flushed. You've always been so frugal, so independent. Every time you helped us in the past, there were lectures about responsibility and living within our means. I couldn't face another one. So instead, you decided to take control of my assets without my knowledge or consent, to make decisions about my life as if I were already incapacitated. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible, he said. Because it is terrible, Stephanie interjected. Bradley, we need to own this. What we did, what we planned to do, was wrong. Her honesty surprised me. Perhaps there was hope for my daughter-in-law after all. What I don't understand, I said, is why you maintain this lifestyle if you can't afford it. The country club membership alone must cost thousands annually. Bradley's expression hardened. You don't understand corporate culture, Mom. Image matters. The right zip code, the right car, the right schools for the kids. It all signals success. And success breeds success. Except it doesn't, I countered, when it's built on debt and deception. True success comes from solid fundamentals, not appearances. Stephanie touched her husband's arm. She's right, Bradley. We've been miserable trying to keep up with the Parkers and the Jacobsons. What's the point of the summer house when we're too stressed about money to enjoy it? A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm tired of lying awake at night wondering how we'll pay for Christmas presents or whether the credit card will be declined at the grocery store. I'm tired of pretending we're fine when we're drowning. Bradley covered her hand with his. I know. Me too. Their vulnerability in this moment felt genuine, perhaps the first honest exchange I'd witnessed between them in years. So what now? Bradley asked, looking at me. You own Meridian. Are you going to fire me? Force us to sell the house? Take back all the help you've given us over the years? Is that what you think of me? I asked softly. That I'm vindictive? That I'd punish my own son and his family out of spite? He had the decency to look ashamed. No, but you'd have every right to. I took a deep breath. I didn't buy Meridian to destroy your career, Bradley. I bought it because it's a solid company, with potential, currently being mismanaged. Whether you remain part of its future depends entirely on your performance and willingness to change. And personally? Stephanie asked. What about our situation? That's a separate issue, I replied. One that requires honesty, accountability, and a solid plan moving forward. I took out my tablet and opened a blank document. Let's draft that plan now. First step, a complete accounting of all debts, assets, and monthly expenses. Second, identifying what can be immediately eliminated to stop the bleeding. For the next hour, we worked through their financial reality in brutal detail. The country club membership would go. The Cape Cod house would be sold, even at a loss. One of their 3 cars would be traded for something more economical. They'd withdraw the children from private school after the current academic year. Each decision was painful for them, representing the dismantling of the carefully constructed facade they'd maintained for years. But with each item crossed off, the path to solvency became clearer. This won't be easy, I warned them. You'll need to have difficult conversations with the children, with friends, with yourselves. Living authentically often means facing uncomfortable truths. Bradley nodded slowly. So this is our punishment? Downsizing our life? It's not punishment, I corrected. It's reality. Living within your means isn't a penalty. It's financial sanity. The alternative is continuing down a path that ends in bankruptcy and true hardship. Stephanie squeezed her husband's hand. We can do this, Bradley. It'll be a relief not to pretend anymore. He didn't look entirely convinced, but he didn't argue either. There's one more thing, I said, closing the tablet. A condition I'm adding to this plan. They tensed visibly. Family therapy, I stated firmly. All 4 of you, plus me when appropriate. The financial issues are just symptoms of deeper problems, communication failures, misaligned values, unhealthy relationship patterns. Money might have been the catalyst for this crisis, but the real issues run deeper. Therapy? Bradley looked skeptical. Is that really necessary? Absolutely, I replied. Consider it non-negotiable. I'll even pay for it, an investment in our family's future. Stephanie nodded immediately. I think it's a good idea. We've been avoiding difficult conversations. For too long, Bradley still seemed resistant, but before he could object further, Emily appeared in the doorway. We couldn't help overhearing, she admitted. Therapy sounds good to me. Maybe Dad can finally talk about why he's so obsessed with what everyone thinks about us. Emily, Bradley protested. What? It's true. You're always worried about appearances. The Wilsons don't show weakness, you say. The Wilsons succeed at everything they do. It's exhausting. Jason appeared beside his sister. Yeah, Dad. Remember when I wanted to quit baseball because I hated it? And you made me play another whole season because Wilsons aren't quitters? That sucked. Bradley looked stunned, as if hearing these perspectives for the first time. Perhaps he was. I watched this family tableau with mixed emotions. Sadness for the dysfunction that had developed, but hope for the honesty now emerging. This is exactly why therapy is essential, I said gently. There's clearly much that needs to be expressed and heard on all sides. Bradley ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking older and very tired. Fine. Therapy it is. And what about Meridian? Stephanie asked. What happens there? I stood gathering my purse. That's a discussion for tomorrow. Bradley and I will meet with Howard and the team to outline next steps. For now, I think everyone needs time to process today's revelations. As I prepared to leave, Jason approached me hesitantly. Grandma, are you still moving to Boston? Absolutely, I confirmed. My lease at Harborview starts next month. He smiled shyly. Cool. Maybe I could help you set up your electronics and stuff. I'm pretty good with tech. I'd like that very much, I replied, touched by his offer. And maybe we could have dinner sometimes? Emily added. Just us, without... She glanced at her parents apologetically. I'd love that, I said. My door will always be open to both of you. Bradley watched this exchange with a complex expression, part jealousy, part regret, part realization of what he'd nearly destroyed with his scheming. As Richard drove me back to my hotel, I gazed out at the Boston skyline glittering against the night sky. The day had been exhausting but necessary. Painful truths had been exposed, difficult conversations initiated. It wasn't resolution yet. That would take much more time and effort. But it was a beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "How did it go?" I typed back, "Progress. Difficult but necessary. Meeting tomorrow at 9 to discuss Meridian's reorganization." Her response came quickly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you become a proper CEO." I smiled faintly. CEO had never been my ambition. But then again, neither had confronting my son's betrayal or dismantling the facade of his perfect life. Sometimes the path forward appears in the most unexpected ways. The most important victory today wasn't about Meridian or even about exposing Bradley's scheme. It was about reclaiming my voice, my agency, my right to determine my own future. No one, not even my own son, would ever again mistake my kindness for weakness or my age for incapacity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I would rest knowing I had stood my ground with grace and wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only comes with 72 years of life experience that Bradley had foolishly dismissed as irrelevant in today's world. How wrong he had been. The Meridian Technologies headquarters looked different in the morning light, less intimidating, more like a canvas awaiting a fresh vision. As Richard dropped me at the entrance, I noticed several executive board members arriving simultaneously, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Word had clearly spread about yesterday's revelations. Nathan Chambers was waiting, in the lobby, his tall frame and silver hair cutting an impressive figure. At 68, he was considered a legend in the tech industry, having guided 3 struggling companies to successful turnarounds. Eleanor had worked miracles securing his services as a consultant. "Margaret," he greeted me warmly. "Ready for day 1 of the new regime?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, appreciating his confident demeanor. "Any last-minute advice?" "Be direct, be decisive, and don't let sentimentality cloud your judgment, especially regarding your son." We rode the elevator in companionable silence. When the doors opened on the executive floor, Howard Mills was waiting, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Chambers, the team is assembled in the main conference room." "Thank you, Howard. And please, call me Margaret." I followed him down the corridor, mentally preparing for what came next. The conference room fell silent as we entered. Around the large table sat Meridian's entire leadership team. 15 people whose careers and livelihoods now partially depended on decisions I would make. Bradley sat at the far end, his posture stiff, eyes downcast. He'd arrived before me, despite our tumultuous evening. That, at least, showed commitment. I took my place at the head of the table, Nathan and Eleanor flanking me like generals preparing for battle. "Good morning," I began. "Yesterday was unexpected for many of you. Today is about charting Meridian's path forward." I opened my portfolio and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. This is Meridian's current financial trajectory, projected 6 quarters into the future. As you can see, without significant intervention, the company becomes insolvent by next summer. Murmurs rippled through the room as executives leaned forward to study the projection. "This isn't news to most of you," I continued. "You've watched revenues decline for 7 consecutive quarters. You've seen your competitive advantage erode as more agile companies entered your market. You've implemented cost-cutting measures that addressed symptoms rather than causes." Howard shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, Mrs. Margaret, we've been developing a turnaround strategy." "Yes, I've reviewed it." I nodded. "It's insufficient. Trimming expenses by 5% when revenues are falling by 23% is like bailing water from a sinking ship with a teacup." I placed a second document on the table. This is Nathan Chambers' preliminary assessment of Meridian's situation, along with his recommended restructuring plan. Nathan took over seamlessly. Meridian has 3 core problems: product staleness, marketing inefficiency, and organizational bloat. Your flagship product hasn't had meaningful innovation in 18 months. Your marketing spend produces diminishing returns quarter after quarter, and your company carries middle management positions that add layers of approval without adding value. Several executives bristled visibly at this assessment. I noticed Bradley's jaw tighten, his department being one of those directly criticized. The plan has 3 phases, Nathan continued, unperturbed by their reactions. Phase 1 is immediate. Cost reduction, not through broad layoffs, but through strategic elimination of redundant positions and processes. Phase 2 is product revitalization, with resources redirected to your engineering and development teams. Phase 3 is market repositioning, with a completely reimagined approach to how you communicate Meridian's value proposition. The Chief Technology Officer, Diane Reynolds, raised her hand. This looks promising for engineering, but these timelines seem aggressive. They are, Nathan acknowledged. But Meridian doesn't have the luxury of gradual change. This is about survival. First, then growth. I watched the team's reactions, some nodding in agreement, others looking defensive or worried. Bradley remained stone-faced, likely anticipating what came next. The marketing department requires particular attention, I said, deliberately not, looking at my son. Current strategies aren't yielding acceptable returns. We need a complete overhaul of approach, messaging, and resource allocation. The director of sales, Robert Chen, spoke up. Our marketing team has won industry awards for creativity. Are we sure the problem isn't with the product itself? Both need work, Nathan replied bluntly. But even the best product fails without effective marketing. And right now, Meridian is spending $12 million annually on marketing activities that generate demonstrably poor results. All eyes naturally turned to Bradley, the department head responsible for those results. To his credit, he met their gazes, steadily. He's right, Bradley said, surprising everyone, including me. My team has been creating visually impressive campaigns that don't convert to sales. We've been tracking the wrong metrics, celebrating creative awards instead of revenue impact. That's on me. The room fell silent. This humble admission was so unlike the Bradley I'd seen recently, the defensive, status-obsessed man who'd schemed to control my assets. Was this genuine accountability or a performance for his colleagues? Thank you for that assessment, Bradley, I said carefully. Which brings us to the reorganization of your department. He tensed visibly, clearly expecting. Termination? Effective immediately, all marketing activities will require approval from a newly established Revenue Impact Committee, consisting of representatives from sales, product development, and finance. Additionally, the marketing budget is reduced by 40% until we see measurable improvement in conversion metrics. Bradley's relief at not being fired was evident, though the restrictions would significantly reduce his autonomy. As for leadership, I continued, Bradley Wilson will remain marketing director, but will report directly to Nathan Chambers during the transition period. Nathan will mentor and evaluate his performance over the next 90 days. This arrangement was both a lifeline and a challenge, giving Bradley the opportunity to prove himself under strict supervision, while making it clear that his position was provisional. We spent the next 2 hours outlining specific changes for each department. By the time we concluded, the mood had shifted from apprehension to cautious optimism. Even those facing budget cuts or restructuring seemed to appreciate the clear vision and decisive leadership, something Meridian had apparently lacked for some time. As the meeting adjourned, I asked Bradley to stay behind. Once we were alone, I studied my son's face. He looked exhausted but somehow lighter, as if the weight of pretense had been partially lifted. Thank you, he said quietly, for not firing me on the spot. I wouldn't have blamed you if you had. That wouldn't serve Meridian's interests, I replied. Despite everything, you know this company and its products. But make no mistake, Nathan will be watching closely. This is your one chance to prove your value. He nodded soberly. I understand. And Personally? Where do we stand? I considered this carefully. That's more complicated. Trust takes years to build and moments to break. You broke it thoroughly, Bradley. Rebuilding will take time and consistent effort on your part. I want to try, he said, and it sounded sincere. Last night, after you left, the kids had a lot to say. None of it flattering. They made me see myself through their eyes. And I didn't. Like what I saw. Children often have that clarifying effect, I observed. Their moral compasses haven't been corrupted by adult rationalizations yet. Emily said she was embarrassed by how we treated you, he admitted, looking pained. Jason asked if we'd do the same to them when they got old. That hit hard. I felt a surge of pride in my grandchildren's ethical clarity. They're good kids, Bradley. Despite everything, you and Stephanie did that right. He managed a weak smile. They take after their grandmother, I think. Straight-talking, principled. Have you and Stephanie discussed next steps? The financial plan we outlined? Until 2 a.m., he confirmed. She's already called the real estate agent about listing the Cape House, and she's researching public school options for the kids next year. This surprised me. Stephanie had always seemed as invested in appearances as Bradley. That was quick. She's relieved, actually. Said she's been wanting to simplify for years, but felt trapped in the lifestyle we'd created. He shook his head ruefully. Apparently, we've both been maintaining a facade neither of us really wanted anymore. That's encouraging, I acknowledged. But actions speak louder than late-night resolutions. I'll be watching to see if these changes materialize. Fair enough. He hesitated, then asked, Will you come to dinner next week? The kids really want to see you, and it would mean a lot to show them we're trying to make amends. I considered declining, part of me still raw from his betrayal, but that would punish Emily and Jason for their father's sins. I'll come. But Bradley, understand this. My relationship with your children will now exist independently of my relationship with you. I won't use them as pawns, and I won't let their connection to me be controlled or filtered through you anymore. Winced, but nodded. I understand. As I gathered my belongings, he asked one more question. The nursing home? Did you ever tell them who you really were? That you owned Meridian? No, I replied. Just that I had a dinner appointment and wouldn't be returning. Why? I called there this morning, he admitted. To formally apologize? For the deception and pay any outstanding fees. The administrator mentioned that several residents had been asking about you. Apparently, you made quite an impression in just a few hours. Did I? This was unexpected. She said you helped an elderly man find his missing glasses and showed a woman how to use the library's computer system. Said you were more helpful than some of their staff. I smiled faintly, remembering. Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Gonzalez. Nice people who needed actual assistance, not to be warehoused and forgotten. Bradley looked away, properly chastised. The administrator also mentioned they have a financial literacy program for residents that could use a volunteer instructor. Said you'd be welcome to come back, as a visitor, not a resident. The irony wasn't lost on me. I might just do that, once I'm settled. There are probably many residents there who could benefit from understanding how to protect and manage their assets. Especially from well-meaning family members with ulterior motives, I didn't add. The point was implied. As I left Meridian's headquarters, that afternoon, I felt a sense of accomplishment and renewed purpose. In just 3 days, I'd gone from being quietly shuffled off to a nursing home to taking control of a multi-million-dollar company, confronting my son's betrayal and beginning to reshape both our family dynamic and Meridian's future. Eleanor met me at the car. Impressed with how you handled that, she said as Richard pulled away from the curb. Especially regarding Bradley. Many in your position would have fired him outright. That would have been emotionally satisfying but strategically unwise, I replied. Bradley knows Meridian's clients and history. With proper supervision and accountability, he might still prove valuable. And personally, has he earned forgiveness? I gazed out the window at Boston's skyline. Forgiveness isn't something you earn like a merit badge, Eleanor. It's a process, a journey we're just beginning. But for the first time since discovering his deception, I believe it might be possible. You're more generous than I would be, she remarked. Not generous, I corrected. Practical. Holding on to anger serves no purpose, and despite everything, he's still my son. My phone chimed with a text message from Jason. Grandma, when you get settled in your new place, can I show you how to set up Netflix? Dad says you still watch DVDs. I smiled, typing back. I'd like that. And maybe you can teach me about those video games you enjoy. A fresh start, not just for Meridian, but for all of us. 6 months can change everything. As I stood at the window of my Harborview apartment, watching sailboats crisscross Boston Harbor on a perfect summer morning, I marveled at how dramatically life had transformed since that cold winter day when Bradley had dropped me at Lakeside Gardens. Today marked 2 significant milestones: the official completion of Meridian's restructuring plan and my 73rd birthday. The company had not only stabilized but was showing promising signs of growth. The birthday, well, that was more complicated. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Family dinner, 6:04 p.m. I'd specifically requested no gifts, no fuss, just a simple dinner with Bradley, Stephanie, and the grandchildren. Whether they'd honor that request remained to be seen. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Eleanor entered with a stack of reports and a knowing smile. The latest numbers from Meridian, she announced, placing them on my desk. You'll be pleased. I skimmed the top report. Second quarter financials showing a 12% increase in revenue and an 18% reduction in operating costs. Nathan's restructuring plan had worked even better than projected. Bradley's department seems to be leading the improvement metrics, I noted with surprise. Marketing efficiency up 40% year over year? Eleanor nodded. Nathan says your son has been working around the clock, completely rebuilt their approach from the ground up, focusing on measurable impact rather than creative flash. Howard's impressed enough that he's advocating for full restoration of the marketing budget. I felt a complex mixture of pride and vindication. So he can rise to expectations when properly motivated. When the nepotism safety net is removed, yes, Eleanor agreed. Nathan believes he's earned the right to continue without direct supervision. This aligned with my own observations. Over these past months, Bradley had shown not just professional growth but personal evolution as well. Our weekly coffee meetings had progressed from awkward to cautiously comfortable. He'd followed through on the financial plan we'd developed, making difficult but necessary changes to his family's lifestyle. The Cape Cod house had been sold, the country club membership relinquished. The family had moved from their oversized Brookline Colonial to a more modest townhouse closer to the city. Emily and Jason had transferred to well-regarded public schools, where they seemed to be thriving. Most importantly, all 4 of them had committed to family therapy, working through years of accumulated tensions and misalignments. Bradley and Stephanie's marriage appeared stronger for the honesty that crisis had forced upon them. You seem reflective today, Eleanor observed. Birthdays do that, I replied, especially when they follow such a tumultuous year. Any regrets? About Meridian? About confronting Bradley? I considered this carefully. No regrets about the actions themselves. Sometimes I question the harshness of my approach, whether I could have found a gentler path to the same outcome. Gentleness wasn't working, Eleanor reminded me. You tried that for decades. True, I acknowledged. And speaking of work, we should review the third quarter projections before the board meeting tomorrow. We spent the next few hours analyzing data and preparing presentation materials. By late afternoon, I was ready for a break before the birthday dinner. Eleanor had just left when my phone rang. Bradley. "Mom, slight change of plans," he said, his tone apologetic. "Could we move dinner to our place instead of the restaurant? Stephanie made your favorite lemon cake, and the kids have something they want to show you that wouldn't work in public." I suppressed a sigh. So much for my no-fuss request. "That's fine. Same time? Perfect. And don't worry, we're respecting your no gifts rule." Mostly. I changed into a casual outfit, linen pants and a light sweater, and texted Richard to bring the car around. The drive to Bradley's new townhouse took barely 15 minutes, one of the advantages of their downsized lifestyle. Their new home was a charming 3-story brick building on a tree-lined street in Cambridge. No sprawling lawn or 3-car garage, but warm and inviting in a way their Brookline showplace never had been. Actual signs of life were visible. Jason's basketball by the front steps, Emily's art supplies visible through the front window, plants that looked genuinely tended rather than maintained by paid landscapers. Bradley opened the door before I could knock, a genuine smile lighting his face. "Happy birthday, Mom." The transformation in him wasn't just financial. There was a lightness to him now, as if shedding the pretense of perfection had allowed him to breathe properly for the first time in years. Inside, the townhouse was comfortably furnished with a mix of pieces I recognized from their previous home and newer, more modest additions. Stephanie emerged from the kitchen, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Margaret, happy birthday." She embraced me warmly. The stiffness that had characterized our relationship for years had gradually melted away during these months of family rebuilding. "Something smells wonderful," I remarked. "Roast chicken with herbs from our little garden," she replied proudly. "The kids have been growing them on the back patio." On cue, Emily and Jason thundered down the stairs. "Grandma's here," Emily announced unnecessarily, throwing her arms around me. At 16, she was at that wonderful age where cynicism and sincerity battled daily, with sincerity often winning when family was involved. Jason, 14 and increasingly conscious of his dignity, offered a more restrained hug. "Happy birthday, Grandma. We have something cool to show you after dinner." "Mysterious?" I replied, playing along. "I can hardly wait." Dinner was delicious, simple but perfectly prepared. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and gentle teasing. So different from the tension-filled meals of the past, where everyone seemed to be performing rather than participating. As Stephanie cleared the dinner plates, Bradley refilled my wine glass. "Mom, before dessert, there's something I want to say." The others grew quiet, sensing the importance of the moment. "6 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my life," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "I betrayed your trust in the most fundamental way, treating you as a problem to be managed rather than as a person deserving respect and autonomy." I started to speak, but he held up his hand. "Please, let me finish. This needs to be said." I nodded, allowing him to continue. "What I did was unforgivable, and yet somehow you found a way toward forgiveness. You could have destroyed me, professionally and personally, and no one would have blamed you. Instead, you created a path for redemption. You held me accountable while still giving me the chance to earn back trust." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "The therapy you insisted on has forced me to confront things I've avoided my entire life. My obsession with appearances, my fear of financial insecurity, my tendency to solve problems through control rather than honesty. I'm still working on all of it, but I'm getting better." Stephanie returned from the kitchen, standing supportively behind her husband. "We both are," she added. "The past 6 months have been the hardest and best of our marriage. Living authentically within our means, focusing on what truly matters. It's like we've finally become adults at 45. Emily rolled her eyes. "They're way less annoying now, Grandma. Dad hasn't mentioned the neighbor's new car once this month." "Progress indeed," I laughed, touched by their sincerity. Anyway, Bradley continued, we know you said no gifts, but we couldn't let today pass without marking it somehow. Kids? Emily and Jason disappeared briefly, returning with a large flat package wrapped in simple brown paper. It's not expensive, Bradley assured me quickly, but it's meaningful. I unwrapped it carefully to find a beautifully framed collage. In the center was a photograph I hadn't seen in decades, Thomas and me on our wedding day, young and radiant with possibility. Surrounding it were dozens of family photos spanning the years, Bradley as a toddler on Thomas's shoulders, the four of us at Bradley's college graduation, me holding newborn Emily, Jason's first baseball game, and more recent additions, all. Of us at Christmas last month, a candid shot of me helping Emily with an art project, Bradley and me leaving Meridian's offices after a successful board meeting. We found all these when we were downsizing, Stephanie explained. Photos that had been packed away in albums and boxes for years. We realized how much family history was just sitting in storage, forgotten. Family isn't perfect, Bradley said, quietly. But it's precious. I almost destroyed ours because I couldn't see past my own fears and ambitions. This is our promise to do better, to honor the past while building a healthier future. I traced the images with my fingertip, emotion tightening my throat. It's beautiful. Thank you. There's one more thing, Jason said, his adolescent awkwardness temporarily forgotten in his excitement. Come outside. They led me to their small, backyard patio where twinkling lights had been strung overhead, creating a magical glow in the summer twilight. In the center stood a wrought iron table with a telescope mounted on a tripod. It's a computerized model, Jason explained eagerly. You can program it to find specific stars and planets automatically. I set it up to track Jupiter tonight. You can see 3 of its moons right now. I peered through the eyepiece, gasping softly at the clarity of the image. It's extraordinary. Dad said you and Grandfather used to stargaze, Emily said. That? You taught Dad all the constellations when he was little. I glanced at Bradley, surprised he remembered those early years, before career ambitions and financial pressures had begun reshaping him. Every summer, I confirmed. Your grandfather built a simple platform on our roof. We'd lie there for hours mapping the night sky. We thought maybe. Bradley hesitated. Maybe you could teach Emily and Jason. Create new memories to go with the old ones. I'd love that, I said softly. As we stood together under the stars, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected 6 months ago. The fractured pieces of our family were being reassembled, not into their original configuration, but into something new, perhaps stronger for having been broken and mindfully repaired. Later, as Richard drove me home, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From the bitter cold day at Lakeside Gardens to this warm summer evening under the stars. From betrayal to tentative reconciliation. From the edge of family dissolution to the beginning of genuine connection. When I reached my apartment, I placed the framed photo collage on my mantel and walked to the window. The Boston skyline glittered against the night sky, much like the stars we'd observed earlier. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, comfortable but complacent, unaware of both the betrayal brewing and my own untapped strength. The crisis Bradley precipitated had forced me to reclaim parts of myself I'd allowed to go dormant. My business acumen, my decisiveness, my willingness to stand firm in my own truth. In trying to sideline me, he had inadvertently propelled me into a new chapter filled with purpose and possibility. My phone chimed with a text from Emily. Thanks for coming tonight, Grandma. Same time Thursday for our astronomy lesson? I smiled. Typing back, wouldn't miss it. Tell Jason to download the star chart app I mentioned. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. A 73-year-old woman with clear eyes and an unapologetic presence. Not a burden to be managed or an asset to be controlled, but a vibrant human being with wisdom to share and life to live. Bradley had attempted to write my final chapter for me. Instead, he'd unwittingly helped me begin an entirely new book. Tomorrow, I would lead Meridian's quarterly board meeting, finalizing the company's new strategic direction. Next week, I would begin volunteer financial literacy classes at Lakeside Gardens, helping residents protect their assets and independence. And this weekend, I would teach my grandchildren to find Cassiopeia in the night sky, just as I had once taught their father. Life had come full circle, but the circle had expanded, encompassing new possibilities I couldn't have imagined from the confines of my old existence. Sometimes, it takes a betrayal to reveal your true allies. Sometimes, it takes a fall to discover you can still rise, stronger than before. And sometimes the nursing home your son deposits you in becomes the very place you return to by choice, not as a resident, but as a teacher, a mentor, a living example of resilience and reinvention. How beautifully, unexpectedly perfect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.